Principal researchers Zilix-9 adjusted their quantum sensors for the 18th time that cycle, certain they must be malfunctioning. The energy readings from the abandoned sector of space defied every known law of physics. The massive research station Axiom, pride of the Galactic Scientific Council, hung silently in the void as its instruments continued to record the impossible. Administrator Thex, Zilix-9 called out, their crystalline form flickering with anxiety. "I believe you should examine these readings personally." The administrator, a towering being of pure energy contained within an environmental suit, glided across the observation deck. Their presence caused the quantum displays to flutter briefly before stabilizing. "What seems to be the issue, principal researcher?" "These energy signatures. They're showing patterns that suggest deliberate manipulation of quantum states without any supporting infrastructure. It's as if something, or someone, is simply asking the universe to behave differently, and it's complying." Administrator Thex's energy form pulsed with skepticism. "That's not possible. The quantum consistency protocols we established 50,000 years ago clearly state." A junior researcher burst onto the deck, their atmospheric membrane quivering with excitement. "Principal, Administrator, we've decoded some of the artifacts from the abandoned space station. The artifacts in question had been discovered 3 cycles ago, floating in a debris field that, according to all scientific instruments, shouldn't have existed. The debris somehow occupied 17 dimensions simultaneously while remaining perfectly visible to the naked eye. Another impossibility that had given Zilix-9 several stress fractures in their crystalline structure. "Report, Junior Researcher Nax," Administrator Thex commanded. "The artifacts. They're entertainment devices. We've managed to access their contents. They contain stories, countless stories, about a species that called themselves humans." Nax's membrane rippled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "The stories describe them doing things that violate fundamental physical laws, not because they found ways around those laws, but because they simply didn't accept them as limitations." Zilix-9 felt their crystal lattice structure tighten with academic skepticism. "Surely these are works of fiction. Entertainment, as you said." "That's just it," Nax continued, producing a holographic display. "We found technical documentation alongside the entertainment devices. The humans didn't just imagine these impossible things, they built them. They created devices that shouldn't work, yet did. They developed faster than light travel by convincing space itself to take a shortcut. They solved entropy by suggesting that thermodynamics should try thinking positive." Administrator Thex's energy form flickered rapidly, the equivalent of a disbelieving head shake in their species. "This is absurd. Where are these humans now? Why haven't we encountered them in our 12 million years of galactic exploration?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The quantum displays across the observation deck suddenly flickered to life, showing readings that made Zilix-9's crystalline structure vibrate with shock. The supposedly empty sector of space before them began to fold. No, that wasn't quite right. It was as if reality itself was being politely asked to step aside for a moment. The vessel emerged from the fold, though calling it a vessel was like calling a supernova a warm day. It seemed to be constructed of equal parts advanced technology, impossible physics, and what appeared to be duct tape. Portions of it existed in dimensions that shouldn't have been accessible from normal space, while other sections seemed to operate on their own unique set of physical laws. The ship's external communication system activated, broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously, somehow managing to be perfectly clear despite violating several laws of signal propagation. "Hi there." The voice was surprisingly casual for a being capable of bending reality. "Sorry we're late to the whole galactic civilization party. We took a bit of a detour through some alternate dimensions. Turned out physics was more of a suggestion than a rulebook. Mind if we park here? This sector looked empty, and we got some really interesting ideas we'd love to share about how to make black holes do tricks." As the assembled researchers stared in stunned silence at the impossible ship and its impossibly casual crew, Xylix 9 realized that the galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. The humans hadn't disappeared. They'd simply stepped out for a moment to figure out how to make the universe more fun. And now they were back, armed with the power of imagination and a complete disregard for what should and shouldn't be possible. Science would never be the same again. The docking procedure between the research station Axiom and the human vessel, which cheerfully identified itself as the workaround, violated 17 different safety protocols and 3 laws of physics. Yet somehow, it worked perfectly. "That's not how airlocks function," Xylix 9 muttered, watching as the human ship's docking mechanism seemed to convince local space-time that a perfect seal had always existed between the two vessels. "That's not how anything functions." The first human to step through the seamless connection between ships was a tall figure wearing what appeared to be a laboratory coat decorated with mathematical equations and coffee stains. She introduced herself as Dr. Jasmine Rodriguez, lead theoretical physics optimizer. Honestly, we're more practical than theoretical these days. Administrator Thex's energy form pulsed with a mixture of scientific curiosity and existential dread. How did you achieve this level of technological advancement? Our records suggest your species was barely achieving chemical rocket propulsion when you disappeared. Dr. Rodriguez grinned, pulling what appeared to be a simple tablet computer from her coat pocket. "Oh, that's a funny story. See, we were working on some basic quantum experiments, trying to figure out why particles behave differently when observed. Then someone, I think it was Dr. Puddle during a particularly sleep-deprived week, said, 'What if we just ask them nicely to do what we want?'" "Ask the particles?" Xylix 9's crystalline structure trembled with confusion. "Exactly." Rodriguez's eyes lit up. "Turns out, the universe is surprisingly amenable to polite requests. We developed what we call quantum negotiation theory. Instead of trying to force particles to behave according to rigid laws, we opened a dialogue. Pretty soon, we were having lovely chats with entropy about taking it easy on closed systems." Junior researcher Nax's atmospheric membrane rippled with disbelief. "But that's not science." "Sure it is," came another voice as a second human emerged from the airlock. This one wore what appeared to be a standard engineer's uniform, though it seemed to shimmer in and out of several dimensions at once. "I'm Chief Engineer Marcus Wong, and let me tell you about our first faster-than-light drive." Wong pulled out what looked like a sandwich and began using it to demonstrate complex physics principles. "Traditional physics says you can't go faster than light, right? But we figured that's just because space and time are being stubborn about their relationship status. So we built this device. We called it the whatever drive, because that's basically how it responds to conventional physics." Administrator Thex's energy form flickered rapidly. "But the mathematical calculations required to safely bypass relativistic limitations." "Oh, we didn't do much math," Wong said cheerfully, taking a bite of his impromptu visual aid. "We just sort of suggested to space that it might be fun to try something new. Turned out space was pretty bored with being rigid and linear anyway. Who knew?" More humans began emerging from the workaround, each carrying devices and tools that seemed to operate on principles that existed somewhere between science and wishful thinking. A group of quantum engineers had apparently taught dark matter to do party tricks. Another team had solved the heat death of the universe by introducing entropy to the concept of optimism. But what about controlled experimental conditions? Xylix 9 protested weakly. "Peer review. Reproducible results." Dr. Rodriguez patted the crystalline being's shoulder sympathetically. "Oh, we still do all that. We just had to expand the definition of reproducible to include results that work because everyone involved believes they should. Turns out, reality is much more flexible when you stop insisting it follow all the rules all the time." The human scientists began setting up their equipment around the Axiom's main laboratory, each device more impossible than the last. A perpetual motion machine powered by narrative causality hummed cheerfully in one corner. A quantum computer that ran on metaphors processed calculations by comparing them to cake recipes. We call it the suspension of disbelief drive, Wang explained, gesturing to their ship's main engine. Conventional physics keeps trying to tell it it's impossible, but it's very passionate about its work and doesn't let criticism get it down. As the day progressed, the Axiom's crew watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as human scientists casually rewrote the laws of physics through a combination of creativity, optimism, and what they called the power of positive thinking applied to quantum mechanics. The real breakthrough, Dr. Rodriguez explained during what she called a physics coffee break, somehow serving coffee that tasted like starlight and possibilities, was when we stopped treating the universe like a strict set of rules and started treating it more like a collaborative storytelling experience. Once we did that, everything got much more interesting. Administrator Thex, their energy form now fluctuating between fascination and resignation, finally asked the question that had been bothering them since the humans arrived. But why? Why bend reality itself just because you can? Dr. Rodriguez and Engineer Wang exchanged glances and smiled. Why not? They replied in unison. And somehow, that answer explained everything and nothing about humanity's approach to science, progress, and the seemingly immutable laws of physics. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for someone to come along and ask that very question. The alert came 3 standard cycles after the humans' arrival. The Axiom sensors detected a massive disturbance in the fabric of space-time, one that hadn't been negotiated with or politely asked to occur. It's a cascading quantum resonance wave, junior researcher Nax announced, their atmospheric membrane vibrating with alarm. The kind theoretically created when multiple universe probability streams collide. Oh, is that all? Engineer Wang looked up from where he was teaching a group of quantum particles to dance the Macarena. We used to get those all the time back when we were first figuring out multidimensional travel. They're like cosmic traffic jams. Administrator Thex's energy form pulsed urgently. This is far more serious than a traffic jam. According to our calculations, this resonance wave will cause a complete breakdown of causal relationships in this sector. Time itself will become. They paused, searching for the right words. Super weird, Dr. Rodriguez suggested helpfully, still sipping her impossible coffee. A complete catastrophe. Xylix 9's crystalline structure vibrated with stress. We're detecting temporal inversions, probability cascades, and, oh no, the wave is causing local physics to start behaving according to actual mathematical logic. The humans in the room gasped in genuine horror. Not mathematical logic. Wang clutched his ever-present sandwich. That's so boring. The resonance waves effects were already visible through the Axiom's observation windows. Space itself seemed to be developing wrinkles, like a cosmic sheet that hadn't been properly ironed. Worse, previously stable quantum states were beginning to resolve themselves without any regard for dramatic narrative potential. We need to evacuate, Administrator Thex announced. Our models show we have approximately 6 hours before. Now hold on just a minute, Dr. Rodriguez interrupted, pulling out her tablet. We didn't spend 3 subjective millennia teaching physics to lighten up just to let it start acting all serious again. She turned to her fellow humans. Team, remember that thing we did with the black hole that was being a bit too enthusiastic about its event horizon? The one where we convinced it that being a tourist attraction would be more fun than consuming all matter. Wang grinned. That was a good day. That black hole now gives excellent tours, even if its jokes are a bit dark. Xylix 9 stared at them in disbelief. You cannot be suggesting we try to reason with a quantum resonance wave. Of course not, Rodriguez replied, typing rapidly on her tablet. We're going to invite it to a party. What followed was perhaps the most unusual crisis response in galactic history. While the Axiom's conventional scientists frantically ran calculations and evacuation scenarios, the human team began what they called setting the mood. They modified the station's quantum field generators to emit what they called good vibes. Engineer Wang reprogrammed the gravity plating to play what he insisted was excellent party music across gravitational waves. Dr. Rodriguez started writing what she called invitation code into the fabric of space-time itself. "This is absurd," Administrator Thex protested, even as their energy form bobbed slightly to the gravitational beat. "You cannot solve a catastrophic breakdown of universal constants with a quantum block party," Rodriguez suggested. "Watch us." As the resonance wave approached, something extraordinary began to happen. The humans' impossibly optimistic approach to physics started to affect the wave itself. Where calculations showed there should be destructive interference, there was instead what Wang described as cosmic harmony. The wave's rigid mathematical properties began to loosen up. "See," Rodriguez pointed excitedly at the readings. "The wave's quantum states are starting to entangle with our party vibrations. It's learning to dance." Indeed, the previously catastrophic resonance pattern was beginning to shift, its deadly serious mathematical progression giving way to something that looked suspiciously like a choreographed light show. But how? Nax's membrane rippled in confusion. "This violates every known principle of quantum mechanics." "Nah," Wang said, adjusting what appeared to be a sound system that ran on pure probability. "We just showed it that there are more fun ways to violate quantum mechanics. Why cause a catastrophe when you could be part of the greatest party this sector of space has ever seen?" The crisis reached its peak as the wave fully engulfed the station, and then, impossibly, transformed into what could only be described as a celebration of physics gone wonderfully wrong. Time danced in loops, probability cascaded in rainbow patterns, and even the most serious quantum equations seemed to be enjoying themselves. Administrator Thex, their energy form now glowing with multiple impossible colors, finally asked, Did we just solve a universe-ending crisis by turning it into a party?" "Sure did," Rodriguez beamed. "And look, the wave's teaching some of your station's more uptight quantum fields to limbo. Isn't that nice?" Zelix9 watched as reality itself seemed to relax and enjoy the moment. "I don't understand. Our most advanced models showed this should have been impossible." "That's your problem right there," Wang said, sharing his sandwich with a friendly probability curve. "You keep telling the universe what it can't do. We just invite it to try new things. Speaking of which, who wants to see what happens when we teach these quantum fluctuations to breakdance?" And so, in the space where apocalypse should have been, there was instead a celebration of possibility. The humans had once again proved that the universe was less about strict rules and more about finding creative ways to bend them, preferably while having a good time. In the weeks following what was now being called the quantum block party incident, the Axiom had become an entirely different kind of research station. Where once sterile laboratories had housed rigid experiments in carefully controlled conditions, now creativity and chaos worked hand in hand with scientific precision. "I still don't understand," Zelix9 said, watching as Dr. Rodriguez demonstrated their latest project. "How exactly does drawing happy faces on quantum processors improve their efficiency?" "It's all about attitude," Rodriguez explained, adding a particularly jaunty smile to a quantum core. "See, we found out that particles are much more cooperative when they feel appreciated. We call it the Friend Request Protocol." The results were undeniable. The processors with happy faces were performing calculations that should have taken centuries in a matter of minutes, apparently because the quantum bits inside felt motivated to try their best. In another laboratory, Engineer Wang had assembled a team of both human and alien scientists to work on what he called the Universal Translation Project. However, rather than focusing on conventional linguistics and signal processing, they were teaching the fundamental forces of reality to communicate with each other. "Gravity's actually pretty chatty once you get to know it," Wang explained to Administrator Thex, whose energy form had developed what looked suspiciously like a sense of humor. "It just needs encouragement. Watch this." He adjusted a device that appeared to be made of equal parts advanced technology and children's toys. Suddenly, the artificial gravity in the room began arranging nearby objects into what was unmistakably a smiley face. See, gravity just wants to be artistic. Now, we're working on getting it to collaborate with electromagnetism for a light show. Those two have great chemistry. Pun absolutely intended. Junior researcher Nax had perhaps undergone the most dramatic transformation. Their atmospheric membrane now sparkled with tiny equations that changed based on their mood, a modification suggested by the human engineers to add some flair to basic physics. "I've been reviewing human scientific history," Nax announced during one of the daily physics and chill sessions that had replaced formal research meetings. Did you know they once had something called writer's block that affected their creative processes? So they decided to solve it by introducing quantum uncertainty to creativity itself. Oh yeah, the inspiration uncertainty principle, Rodriguez nodded. If you can't decide what to create, just exist in a superposition of all possible ideas until someone observes you. Works every time, 60% of the time. The real breakthrough came when the combined team decided to tackle one of the galaxy's most persistent problems: the speed of bureaucracy. The Galactic Council had always been notorious for taking decades to approve new research proposals. The paperwork exists in a state of quantum superposition, Administrator Thex explained, their energy form flickering with frustration. It can take years just for a form to collapse into a definite state of either approved or denied. "Sounds like we need to teach bureaucracy about efficiency," Wang said, pulling out his tablet, which now ran on what he called administrative probability functions. The solution they developed was characteristically human. They created what they called a quantum filing system that existed in a state of having already been approved before it was even submitted. By applying the principles of temporal negotiation and adding some encouraging stickers, they'd managed to convince paperwork to process itself. "It's really quite simple," Rodriguez explained to a bewildered group of council representatives. "We just help your administrative systems understand that processing forms quickly is more fun than letting them pile up. Also, we may have introduced them to the concept of speed dating." "You taught bureaucracy to date?" one of the representatives asked weakly. "Well, we figured if paperwork can fall in love with efficiency, everyone wins," Wang shrugged. "The forms are much happier now, and some of them have even started a book club." But perhaps the most significant change was in how the alien scientists began approaching their own research. Inspired by humanity's methods, they started experimenting with adding elements of creativity and personality to their experiments. Xylix-9 had taken to singing to their crystal growth experiments, discovering that the crystals grew in more interesting patterns when exposed to what humans called good music. Administrator Thex found that their energy form could perform more complex calculations when they allowed themselves to dance with the numbers rather than simply processing them. "I think I'd finally understand," Nax said one day, as they watched a group of human and alien scientists teaching a black hole to do impressions of other celestial objects. "It's not about breaking the laws of physics. It's about showing physics that there are more interesting ways to be a law." "Exactly," Rodriguez beamed. "The universe isn't a strict parent laying down rules. It's more like a friend who's up for trying new things if you ask nicely and make it fun." As if to prove her point, the black hole chose that moment to do a surprisingly accurate impression of a supernova, complete with what could only be described as jazz hands made of gravitational lensing. "You know," Wang mused, watching the performance, "I think we might be onto something bigger than just new technology here. We're not just changing how we do science, we're changing how the universe sees itself." The universe, it seemed, was rather enjoying its new perspective. After all, why be a rigid framework of mathematical constants when you could be the life of the party, a new era? One standard galactic year after the humans' return, the annual Conference of Universal Sciences looked very different from its previous iterations. The normally austere Grand Hall of the Galactic Council had been transformed into what Dr. Rodriguez called a science festival with pizzazz. Holographic displays showed experiments that would have been considered impossible mere months ago. A group of crystalline researchers, led by an enthusiastic Xylix-9, demonstrated how they had taught light waves to express themselves through interpretive dance. The resulting light show was not only beautiful but had revolutionary implications for communications technology. The photons just needed some encouragement to explore their artistic side, Xylix-9 explained to an amazed audience. Their own crystalline structure now sparkled with tiny embedded equations that formed different patterns based on their mood, a fashion trend that had spread throughout their species. Administrator Thex, presenting their latest research on energy form evolution, had incorporated what they called quantum choreography into their demonstration. Their energy form shifted through impossible colors as they explained how they had convinced the laws of thermodynamics to take up yoga. Entropy, we discovered, was simply stressed, they explained to thunderous applause. Once we introduced it to meditation and proper work-life balance, it became much more reasonable about the whole heat-death of the universe thing. In one corner of the hall, Engineer Wang had set up what he called a physics petting zoo. Young scientists from across the galaxy could interact with friendly fundamental forces that had been taught to play games. Gravity was particularly popular, giving the children rides by temporarily reducing its influence in controlled areas. The secret, Wang confided to a group of impressed researchers, is to treat universal constants more like universal variables with good personalities. Sure, they have jobs to do, but that doesn't mean they can't have fun doing them. Junior researcher Nax, now heading their own department of quantum social dynamics, presented their groundbreaking work on teaching dark matter to be more outgoing. It's not really dark matter, they explained, their atmospheric membrane glittering with excitement. It's just shy matter. Once we helped it build some self-confidence, it's been much more willing to interact with the visible universe. Look, it's even starting to develop a sense of humor. As if on cue, a cluster of dark matter formed itself into what appeared to be a cosmic-scale knock-knock joke. The real breakthrough presentation came when Dr. Rodriguez unveiled the galaxy's first probability park, a space where the laws of physics were encouraged to experiment with new ways of expressing themselves. It was simultaneously a research facility, public attraction, and what she called a summer camp for universal constants. Think of it as a playground for reality itself. She explained as she led a tour through areas where gravity played hopscotch with electromagnetism, and quantum uncertainty had set up an improvisational comedy club. We're not breaking the laws of physics, we're helping them explore their full potential. The impact on galactic civilization was profound. Species that had once approached the universe with rigid mathematical precision began to see the value in creativity and imagination. Meanwhile, the humans' seemingly chaotic methods were tempered by alien wisdom and experience, leading to what Wang called the best of both worlds, plus snacks. Even the Galactic Council had undergone a transformation. Their once staid meetings now featured what Administrator Thex called diplomatic jazz, a decision-making process that combined careful consideration with creative problem-solving. They had even taught their quantum supercomputers to appreciate jokes, leading to significantly more entertaining progress reports. The universe, Dr. Rodriguez observed during the conference's closing ceremony, is a lot like a good story. It has rules, sure, but the real magic happens when you learn to play with them creatively. Xylix-9, their crystal structure now permanently modified to display tiny dancing equations, nodded in agreement. I used to think science was about controlling and predicting everything. Now I understand it's more about building a positive relationship with reality. That's humanity's real gift to the galaxy, Administrator Thex added, their energy forms swirling with joy. Not the technology or the impossible solutions, but the simple idea that the universe isn't just a set of rules to be followed, it's a friend to be understood. As the conference concluded, the assembled scientists watched in wonder as a group of stars in the nearby cluster began performing what appeared to be a synchronized swimming routine. the result of a collaboration between human creativity and alien precision that had taught stellar physics to appreciate performance art. Engineer Wang, munching on his ever-present sandwich, which now existed in quantum superposition of all possible flavors simultaneously, smiled at the display. "You know what the best part is?" He asked no one in particular. "This is just the beginning. Wait until we show the strong nuclear force how to breakdance." And throughout the galaxy, reality itself seemed to hum with contentment, like a strict teacher who had finally learned to loosen up and enjoy the classroom. The age of rigid physics was over. The era of possibility and probability, and maybe a little party, had begun. After all, as humans had proven, the only real universal constant was imagination. Everything else was negotiable, especially if you brought snacks to the negotiation.